So the conlang has taken an interesting turn. I think it's now going to become a conlang centered more in my idiolect and my own ideas rather than the old tongue from Wheel of Time, even though I'm sure that I will draw inspiration from that as well as from other languages and the other languages that I speak. And seeming like, at least during the development of this language, will be, I am just using it to sort of supplement the other languages that I speak, because I'm not developing it primarily for an external culture to myself, even though that will probably gather around it. I have some images in my head of ways in other worlds that this language could have emerged, but I'm mostly developing it because I want to use it. Anyway, the method of creative project development that I have been able to fit is this, just embodying whatever I'm creating, taking it into my daily life and thought, and then letting whatever emerges emerge as needed or as it just emerges. Especially with what this is becoming, which is just a sort of catalog of what is already flowing through my mind and the ways that I think and the categories that I work in, which are a little to the left from the terms that I have to describe them. Anyway, with especially such a personal way, it's really more of a providing a space and watching things emerge and then trying to see what's going on, describe it, rather than a forced creativity or forcing the thing and consciously shaping it. And I guess that's nice for me to see that it works this way, because in the past, especially with my writing or anything that I would undertake, I felt very pressured to make it happen, to make it conform to certain rules, to make myself go get whatever background information, etc. It was just a lot of pressure, and it was really stressful. And I look back at my old stories and such, and I just kind of wince in poems because I just remember how much gritting the teeth effort was in it, and it just doesn't leave a very good taste looking at it. Anyway, the emergent purpose of this language seems to be to capture a little bit more tightly. I made a couple of those videos about what goes on in my head and specifically how I think, in less generic terms than just thinking, because I feel like there's a lot more going on there. Mostly we just don't talk about it. Anyway, so to capture sort of some of those movements, habitual gestures, and patterns, which of course are faster and deeper than words most of the time, but giving them words strengthens them and gives them a little bit more solidity. And at this point, a lot of what I am doing in the pattern realm sounds awkward or cobbled together if I try to describe it in English. I mean, I'll be looking at something and I'll be like, oh yes, Y participates in the angel of X. And I know what I mean and it makes perfect sense to me, but it's I just use terms with such a difference from their normal meaning, etc. Yeah, so idiolect, basically. And the grammar is very slowly emerging. I think it's going to be another of those highly, polysynthetic languages with a lot of modifications of words, a lot of long words. And I suppose it doesn't have to be. I think it will be though, because Totipone is not, and I already speak Totipone anyway. And then based primarily around verbs. It just seems like that's the way we're going, and I guess it makes sense that so many conlangs and so many languages are centered around the verbs, because verbs describing actions, I could see them as being genuinely deeper in a sense than nouns, because movement and action is in a sense deeper than some still object. Anyway, verbs. And then probably a lot of like tense aspect, the way that things are done, patterns over actions. It's looking very geometrical, or like lots of geometry type of terms and terms for very specific patterns, like over interval, like for instance, okay, so if you think of something / event / action, which is one. I'm always looking for a word that means all those three, but I can't, there's no word. Anyway, that, entity, but entity, anyway, repeated over intervals of time, and then like maybe continually over intervals, or for a season of time, or a short season of time, or repeated with development, something being repeated and variated and elaborated on, etc., and such. I want to keep the language open and flexible, because as I learn more, well, both as my thought develops and then also as I take in more math and like more geometry, etc., I'll get a lot more precise with knowing exactly what I'm doing and just have a lot more material, and I want to be able to work that into whatever this becomes. Yeah. Anyway, some other characteristics are the idea of the pattern from Wheel of Time is definitely, it's like something that I see anyway. So time and space and the world and worlds and ages seen as this sort of weaving of threads. I also think of it as perhaps a flow of like water, like energy and movement, or as the bodies of angels, of spirits / music. And I guess in Christianity there's the idea of like the choir of the angels, and so I think I tie that in and say, well, that's like the cosmos is the song. Isn't that from that's from Tolkien, the Song of the Ainu, or however? Yeah, that. So like music, but it's all like the pattern, and then we can channel and weave these things. Also in this language, time is seen, the future is up, the past would be beneath, the future is coming down, or I guess entities are moving up into the future. But also there is a certain cyclical movement to it, and because I think time isn't linear, so like things buried from beneath could also come back up. And there's a sort of ambiguity whether it is emergent or imminent, whether anything is coming up from the future, from above, or down from beneath. So something like that, but future up, past down generally. And this is the way that I've started thinking anyway, like Pierre Teilhard talks about the God of the above and the God of the ahead. It just helps to think of, for instance, both the future and one's future hopes as being above, and also what else is above, which we naturally conceive of, like our ideals, or like figures that we aspire to, like things we aspire to, or like heaven understood as a constantly present reality. So sort of tying all of those ideas together helps me to think. This project has already been so fun and opened up, like, seeing a lot more transparently the ways that language works and that concepts work and what is going on with the thoughts that and patterns of my thought and also of reality. And making new words and playing with words this way helps make new gestalts and like bind certain concepts together, which can be really helpful for like a short, because that's the pattern of any kind of learning, is you get the basics and then you combine those, and then you process all of those as like one bigger entity, and it just keeps sort of folding bigger and bigger. I mean, like if you think of like riding a bike. No, that's a bad example. like climbing, you could maybe do one move and then another move and then another, then chaining them together. And it becomes consolidated. Anyway, so for instance, in Tokipona, which I didn't even make up, but in Tokipona, awen means both wait and protect. And that's sort of become a part of my idiolect now, and I associate those concepts, and all the time I'm thinking about how waiting and protection are similar, which really helps with being patient. And it's just interesting. It illuminates / creates a lot of connections and draws out, I guess draws out is a good middle between those two, draws out a lot of connections in the world. Anyway, yeah. I just have a whole list of like vague descriptions of certain entities that I might want a word for, and I'm just gonna let it grow until some more order emerges.